Thank you everyone for joining in today. Thank you, Tanvi, and thank you to all the participants. I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome everyone for the second series of Talks by Women Photographers, and I hope everyone here is keeping well and safe. The platform Talks by Women Photographers was conceived with an idea to celebrate the works of women photographers and to familiarize the audience with their incredible contribution to the field of visual storytelling. We're excited to bring to you another week of engaging talks from photographers, photo editors, curators, and experts on photography. On the request of today's speaker, our format today will be slightly different. We're hoping for this to be more conversational. And after about the first 40 to 50 minutes, we'll open the platform for questions from the audience. To introduce today's speaker to us, we have Tanvi Mishra joining us here from Delhi. Welcome, Tanvi. Tanvi is a Delhi-based photo editor and curator. Among her interests are the politics and representation within the photographic medium and its impact on South Asian histories and narratives, as well as the notion of fiction in photography, particularly in the current political landscape. She currently works as the creative director of The Caravan, a journal of politics and culture published out of Delhi. She is also part of the editorial team of PIX, a South Asian publication and display practice. She was part of the Delhi Photo Festival team in India and was the guest curator of the second edition of Photo Kathmandu, held in Nepal in 2016. Tanvi has served on various juries, including the World Press Photo Awards 2020 and the Hindu Photojournalism Awards 2019. Thank you so much for your time, Tanvi, and thank you for coming here. Welcome, over to you.
Thanks for calling me here, and thanks for everybody who's shown up. I see a lot of familiar names in that list. Yeah, as I was telling Soumya 5 minutes ago, that it's interesting that she called me for this because it's a talk by women photographers, and for me, I think there was this sort of break in my journey where I let go of the tag of calling myself a photographer. I definitely love the medium of photography and want to stay engaged with it for a very long time. But I think there was a certain distance that I drew from being the image maker and stepping on over into another part of the chain and becoming comfortable with that idea of letting go of being the person who has the authorship and being the person who gets the byline and essentially stepping back a little bit. And now I actually feel very fortunate that I'm able to occupy that position. So essentially, Soumya told me that I should talk about my journey, and it was really difficult to condense like 11 years into 40 minutes. But I thought it might be nice to give an idea from where I actually began and sort of where I am now, because it's actually not what I would have imagined at all, and not what I could have predicted. And now looking back, quite grateful for some things that happened along the way that seemed undesirable at the time. And I hope, like, for some of the younger photographers who are here, maybe that might be sort of a way to think about some challenges that life throws at you at certain points, which might make sort of the trajectory that you planned for yourself a bit different. So I'm going to try and do the share screen thing. Here, and then so yeah, you can see that I think it's got onto one image. And yeah, so this is going really, really far back. It's kind of making yourself naked in front of somebody in a way, in front of a lot of people, because I really don't show my own photographic work much anymore. But I thought it was a good exercise, because we make photographers do this all the time, right? We make them strip themselves bare and tell them to send us long edits, which we then crush down. And the people who I'm quarantining with were actually joking with me today, saying that it's so much easier for you to edit down other people's work. And I was really struggling to bring all of these images of so much work into an edit for 40 minutes. So just going to give you a very, very quick sort of run through into how how my journey kind of began. I definitely had the dream of being a photographer. Soumya asked me the other day I should talk a bit about what I was doing before. I was actually doing my master's in economics in London, and and the recession hit in that year. It was 2008, and somehow I felt that was not the path for me, and I basically dropped out of my master's program, much to the dislike of my parents. And I was shooting quite a bit at that point, and decided that why not kind of give photography a chance. Much like the advice that I give a lot of people around me, I was told by some friends and some, well, I wouldn't say mentors, but people who cared at the time, to say that just photograph what is around you. And much like a lot of projects that I see now, I photographed my grandmother, my paternal side of the family. It was something that was quite difficult because I felt that I had absolutely no relationship with them. I grew up in Delhi, metropolitan city, very different life from what my father had when he was young. They grew up in Puri and Orissa. I only had very fleeting memories of childhood of spending time with them. So this is essentially photographs. This is actually my great grandmother. I had the fortune of meeting her. And now actually looking back, I'm very glad that I did this, not because it turned into some grand photographic project, but it's kind of the idea of preservation of memory. And so much of memory making I do of other people's work with their families, that I feel that this work that I did with mine was sort of my start of my journey into photography, but also a way for me to preserve some of these, I don't want to call them documents, but these are the only memories I have with that part of my family, which I don't have actual relational memories with. Also, for a bunch of the younger ones in the audience, the ones who are thinking of photographic education, I did apply to the photojournalism program at ICP, got through, saw that it was so expensive. My parents said, there is no way that we're going to be able to get this kind of money. So rethink this. And in the time that I was deferring my program, I just started freelancing in Delhi. And the only kind of educational foray that I had was at Anchor, a workshop that I think a few Asian photographers have had. Quite a lot of Asian photographers have actually done the Anchor workshop. And now looking back, again, this is like a long time ago. And now looking back, this is a week-long assignment. You work with your mentor, you work with your mentor, who is essentially your editor for that week. And this to me was a way to really open up, try and approach people, get comfortable, very early on assignments into photography. I think some of the early work, which then progressed into some of the freelance assignments that I did, later on I worked a bit for Indian publications, some for international publications. I did a bunch of NGO work, and I'm going to breeze through this initial section because this is sort of really the building block for what I do now. I haven't looked at my assignment work for years. And today was, I guess all the photographers are going through their archives in this lockdown. Somehow Caravan doesn't give us any time to go through our archives, but this request for this talk definitely made me do it. And this was kind of the only one that I felt that I still resonate with. I used to do a lot of NGO work, and I'm very grateful for that kind of work, because I know that a lot of photographers do get assignments from NGOs, from development organizations. While I'm very fortunate to have been to many places that I wouldn't have been earlier, rural India, a lot of rural India, where there are projects of education, alleviating poverty, projects related to climate change, some great projects that I've seen around health. And you get a sort of an insider's view to how these spaces function. While I loved some of that work, I also found myself questioning at a particular point of time where my images were going. And I think the breaking point for me really came when I was flown from Delhi to a Southeast Asian country and hosted in a very fancy spa resort. And in the morning, we were going to photograph farmers tilling their land. But we entered with a cavalcade of 7 cars. And one of the people in the cars was the CEO of the NGO who had flown in on a private jet. And the picture that I had to make was him tilling the land with the farmers. And I was like, there's something very wrong with this for me personally. The thing is, there are many uses for that kind of photograph. It can lead to more funding, but the funding can go back into the project. So this is not, I think it's for every person, they find their own answers. For me, it cropped up a lot of questions of why is there not a local photographer here? Why have all these resources been spent on me to come here? Why do I have to show this wealthy person tilling the land with people who do this every day for them to get money? Like, there were too many questions and I was quite confused by it. I also feel that over the years, your ability to articulate your politics becomes easier. At that point, I don't think I had this vocabulary to be able to say why I was confused. And I think now it makes it much easier for me. So this is kind of the only keepsake I have from my NGO work, and I actually really enjoyed looking back at this photograph. But so yeah, so at about 3 years in, I had a big health scare, which at the time seemed like the most disastrous thing to happen. I had to have a spinal surgery, and basically my doctor said, you need to rethink your career. You cannot do photography anymore. You can't carry heavy equipment, and you can't be traveling to places that don't where transport may be difficult. So you travel on roads that are kacha. I don't know for the what do you call kacha in English? Not fully paved roads.
You mean dirt roads?
Yeah, dirt roads. So just places where transport is just not how it is in cities. And they were basically saying, you need to rethink your career. This is not going to work. And actually, now looking back, I was 6 months after my surgery. I was in lockdown, did not step out of the house and recovering, which seems like much tougher than what the last 40 days were like. I definitely got cabin fever. But this was kind of something that happened very serendipitously at the time. I got a call from a stranger. I did not know this person. And he came up to me and said, would you like to curate a show? And I was like, I don't know anything about curating work. I mean, I had been looking at certain kinds of work, but he said, I would like you to curate a show. And the only thing that I want is that it should be a conversation between Singapore and India, because he was Singaporean and he'd been living in India for a while. And this was sort of my first foray into a world that I inhabited for quite a while after. So this was a show that was called Postcards from the Interior. It was a show of 6 photographers, that 3 from Singapore, 3 from India. The work in the beginning, that was Sean Lee's work. This is Carrie Lamb's work. But yeah, they were all photographers that were looking inward, that were looking at, there was the ideas of self, identity, belonging. And for me, I was really, and I still am very grateful for the photographers that opened up their archives to basically someone who was a novice. I really was figuring my way out with them. And I think one of the photographers, and this is his work, Sumit Dayal, I sort of learned along with him. He had been shooting in Kashmir for a while, and he has his roots in Kashmir. And he had never shown the work, but I had I knew that he was working on this, and I asked him that, like, would you agree to show the work in the show? And we made this it's very raw. We made this motion sensor installation of the previous image that you saw. Those were all identity photographs that Sumit had collected along the line of control, separating India and Pakistan in Kashmir. And he wanted to replicate the experience that he had had while visiting the LOC, which is essentially, he said, this is not a definitive collection of the demographic or the people who live on the LOC. These are just the photographs that he found through studios, and this is just the collection that he chanced upon. So if you enter a gallery, you will have a different experience from me. I will light up a different set of people, and you will light up a different set of people. And we wanted for the audience to resonate with that idea. And it was very raw. We went shopping for every single part of this and constructed this thing at a friend's studio. And I really felt that this was a big point of learning for me, where we did this installation in my very first show, this quite a few years ago. So, and another part of Sumit's work, which actually resonates with something that we just finished a week ago, which I'll show later on. This is an album that we made, that we put up on the wall, and now looking at it, I was like, maybe it should have been on the table. And that's what happens when you look back at your work from many years ago. Like, I would do it differently now. But it has photographs from Sumit's family in Kashmir. And we made a new album for those photographs to sit in it. So sort of recreating the family album for the walls of the gallery. So that was my first foray into curatorial work. And I kind of wanted to, and feel free to ask me anything, but I wanted to premise that was sort of the shifting point for me to move away from being a photographer into being something else. And it's only now that I'm starting to figure out what that something else is. And for me, it's really that I'm a collaborator. I take on different roles depending on what the collaboration is. So in a curatorial space, which might be a three-dimensional exhibition space, here previously it was indoors in a closed room. Here it is outdoors. You know, the space doesn't matter, but it's an experiential thing. But so that's a curatorial space. Currently, I work as a creative director at Caravan, which is a publication, but also an online space, but it's still a collaboration. I also write about photography, but I don't call myself a writer. And I think that writing about someone's work can be a collaboration. And so I think I'm quite free that way. While I gave up the tag of being a photographer, and I have to admit, for the first few years, it was difficult because it's like promoting everybody else's work but yourself. Now it's become, now I'd rather put everybody else's work but myself. Like, the last thing I would want to do is put my pictures out. And then that shift, I think, is quite important. These are actually images from one of my favorite experiences. Somebody told me to talk about my favorites, so I picked some of them out. This is from a festival in Nepal, and you have Nayantara, who's going to be a part of. My dog has joined the talk. So Nayantara, who's the co-founder of Photo Kathmandu, who's going to be speaking with you on Sunday, I think. She had invited me to be one of the guest curators at the 2016 edition. And these are basically images from a larger group show that I did, which comprised 4 elements. But essentially, the show was called Measures of War and Memories of Loss. And essentially, it was about 3 conflicts. But there were 3 conflicts that were internal conflicts. So it was the Maoist insurgency in Nepal, it was the Maoist insurgency in India, and it was a civil war in Sri Lanka. These 3 works across 4 artists, I think. So this is People War. This was collected through Kunda Dixit's archives. Kunda Dixit is the editor of Nepali Times. I'm not going to go into each and every one of the works, but this was looking at the Maoist insurgency in Nepal. And I think what, for me, tied up all the works was how the civilian was affected in all of these conflicts, and how it is often the civilian that is collateral damage, but in many ways, these are battles over land and these are the politics of land. And many times it is the civilian that turns the rebel. So where are the lines that separate these spaces? This is also from Kunda's work. The Maoist insurgency in India was photographed by Ishan Tankha. His work, Appeal of Spring Thunder, which I had a great time curating. It's a work done over 8 years. And he's essentially looking at how the politics of land becomes a rebel conflict. Something that resonates for me in this and a previous work and future works is sort of the politics that lie within in artist practice and how you collaborate on that. So these are just sort of installed shots. They didn't really want a photograph of me in there, but this is just to show a little bit of the chaos that goes into before a show is up. That is on the right there is Prasit, who is a fantastic photographer, also based out of Nepal. But also to show you that Photo Kathmandu is comprised of a bunch of very talented photographers that put this photo festival together, and they do everything from building the frames, nailing them into the wall, and it's a very self-sufficient space. But this is also what the show looked like. We don't have a lot of install shots, but yeah, so this is the civilian was what tied all three works for me. And we also use the outdoor space. I like working with outdoor spaces a lot. Photo Kathmandu, most of the exhibitions were in outdoor spaces. It was about breaking sort of the very precious monotony of the indoor gallery. It's also the interaction with the physical space outdoors, but also how people react to photography. And there you see Ishan's work on the right, and there is Stephen's work on the left. I'm going to quickly go through this, but essentially for me, a successful group show is that the collection needs to be stronger than what the individual works bring. And for me, that this show did that for me, that all these works together brought up a much larger idea within South Asia about internal conflicts than the individual works. And I really like the process of being able to collaborate with multiple artists to be able to create something else, an addition to what they have, or yeah, another form. This is from another favorite artist of mine, Azadeh Akhlaqi, also from, this is also at Photo Kathmandu, but I'm just going to use this to segue into another project of mine that, that I have done with some fabulous people over the last, I would say now 9 years, since 2011. This is this is Azadeh's work. Please go check her out. I'm not going to explain the work because that probably takes me the rest of the talk, but the work has elements of fiction in it, but it's formed from real life actual events. These are all staged photographs. There are almost 300 people, that a crew of 300 people making one photograph. So it's very, very meticulous. And how I met Azadeh and how I got to know about this work was when me and the editor of Pix. So Pix is for those in the audience who don't know, and there might be many, it's a publication and display practice. So we produce a volume, we produce an issue, and we also do exhibitions when we have the money for it. And it's looking at all of South Asia, and as per our funders, Iran and Afghanistan are a part of South Asia. So these are spreads from the Pix Iran issue, and this is Azadeh's work. And this is a collection of the covers that we have of 17 issues that we made till now. The one on the top left there is our latest issue, which we launched on the 30th of last month. All available on the website. Please go check it out. It's at enterpix.in. But I don't know how much of a conversation we're really having, because I feel like I'm just going on and on.
I mean, thank you for showing all the works, and it's interesting to see your transition from your personal work to your curatorial work. But the question that I have for you is, uh, what have been your influences in your curatorial works?
Influences. So I think I'm just going to expand that into what my influences have been overall, because I don't think I have specific influence for curatorial work, and for others, I think they're all quite mixed and they cross over. Because I didn't go to photo school, I don't have a roster of seminal photographers whose works I follow. Pics, which I was invited to by Rahab Alana, who is the curator at the Al Ghazi Collection of Photography and also the managing editor of Pics. And we're a team of literally, we've been 4 people at one point and maximum 6 at the others. So he invited me to be a part of it, and we visited a lot of the countries in South Asia. We had wonderful funders who said, if you have to do an issue about a country, you have to go there. You can't sit on the internet and try and find artists from there, because that's just not how it's done. And this is an install shot from the Pakistan issue. This is an installation in Delhi, and this is an installation in Pakistan. And this is a talk that we had in Pakistan. And why I actually included this slide in here is because 2 of the people in this photograph, one who is speaking and the one next to him, Arif Mahmood, who's speaking, is a photographer, and the one next to him also is. But Durya Kazi, who's sitting on the right, is actually she's a professor at Karachi University. And my influences are all these people. So while we were researching for Pics, and how I developed my other interests were that influences came from many places. So we would meet photographers, but we would also meet filmmakers, historians, anthropologists, journalists, writers, musicians sometimes, anybody who's responding to visual culture. We would hold meetings with them. We would go to universities a lot, and we would meet with students, and these could be like mass communication students, it could be BFA students, and we would talk about the idea of building a photographic archive, contemporary photographic archive in South Asia, and what they thought of it. So I think my influences came through all of these trips and all this work that I saw, that was not necessarily all photographic. I can quickly run you through, and those of you who are interested, this issue just came out, and you can flip through the whole thing online. But I'm just going to show you that this is the latest issue. It's called Personal Paradigms. We're looking at personal histories. So going through a lot of family archives, but also questioning the notion of family. Here, a person submitted, Joel, he submitted photographs from his parents' wedding and sort of their love for each other. This is a chance encounter between a photographer and a person who lives quite an unusual life. I'm not going to reveal a lot. Quite an unusual life at an elderly age. This is a very interesting archive of someone who was on the front lines of the 1971 war at the time of the East Pakistan partition, and he was in the Indian Army. And this was a photo album that he made at the time. He took photographs, and you can see that there are some photographs that are missing. We reprographed the album and we put photographs of the album in Pics. So this is a layout of Pics. This is sort of a behind the scenes of what an army officer's life looks like when you're at war, which we don't see very often. I definitely don't see it, because I remember researching for a story in the caravan where we were looking at sort of historical images from the 1971 war, and this is not what I found on The Wire. On The Wire, what I found is soldiers out on the field, but when soldiers are not on the field, they're with their buddies and like cheering victory. Or this is some of the images on the right are after the war. So this is sort of an album that he had made of the family that he had created while he was out at war for 6 months. So Pics sort of allows you to, we do a thematic every issue. And I'm going to just talk very briefly about this work and segue into my work at the caravan. This is the work of Rajeshri Goody. She's an artist based out of Pune, and I absolutely love this work. On the left are actually recipe poetries, which she has got from Dalit autobiography. She's Dalit herself, and she's looking at building sort of a parallel visual collection. I wouldn't say a history, but a collection of the representation of the Dalit identity. And she does this through her own family photographs. The work is called Eat with Great Delight. And she's looking at food and photographs around food in her own family archive. And she says this, that while we see the representation of the Dalit identity a lot through oppression, which she recognizes is very, very important, there is also another side that she has seen growing up in a Dalit household, she doesn't think that they need to compete with each other. It's just something that she wanted to preserve. And I really appreciated accessing an identity politics through a personal family archive that could then talk about a social history. And we all know that the politics of food is very complicated. And when we bring caste into it, the politics of hunger, the politics of touching a plate, eating from somebody else's plate, etc. These are complex issues. So she's not evading the idea of oppression. She's approaching it from a different perspective, and I really enjoyed including this work. But I'm going to quickly segue into Caravan, because that's what I do now all the time, every time. I wish it, yeah, all the time. So, and why I'm actually going into this piece in the Caravan is because these images are also from Rajeshri Goody. She's an artist who works with not just photography. And this was an essay that was looking at caste. It was looking at the politics of eating beef. And this is an installation. I'm not going to talk about the installation. You guys can go on to Rajeshri Goody's website or go to our website, either place. But just to tell you that these are sculptures that she's made of a dish called lal bhaji. And it's a red vegetable, but it is also a code name for eating beef. And what is at the bottom, the paper-like red thing, is actually made from a pulp manusmriti. So she's looking at, and I apologize to the people who are not from India on this talk, because to explain the context of this, it will take a whole other talk. But essentially, she's looking at the politics of caste. And I liked how my understanding of the visual medium from before Caravan plays a lot into the work that I do at Caravan, because when I was thinking of what are the images that I want to run with an essay on the fight for beef as a democratic right, did I want photographs? And also, beef is not really available. It's being banned across the country. You're fighting for the right to be able to eat it. What was my other choice? I could have had plates of beef or beef stalls. I found that idea very boring. And so I was looking at artists who were responding to the same politics as what the article was espousing, and putting both of them together, I thought made a very strong piece. So yeah, this is kind of a very quick look into what we do at the Caravan. A lot of it, and why I went from that work into this is because there's a lot of writing about caste. This was also a piece that was written by the same author that wrote the previous piece, Dr. Kanchalaya Shepherd. He writes a lot on caste, and the piece was, where are the Shudras? And he's asking the question of, where are they in a sort of an intellectual movement? And being a Shudra himself, he positions it from that perspective. It was a really difficult cover. This cover is by Zishan Akbar Latif, a very accomplished photographer in Bombay, based out of Bombay and Delhi. And why this was very difficult is because we were talking about the absence of an identity that is very difficult to show visually. Like, how do you show caste? When I looked at references, I came across a lot of American magazine covers on race, but the one basic difference between race and caste is that race is visible. There is a color of the skin. Caste is visible in society, but not visible as per how we know race to be visible. So how do you show caste? And I don't know if we were successful or not. Some said we were, some said we weren't, but But these are the kind of visual exercises that we have to go through. I also, as the creative director, overlook the design. I have a fantastic team, a very, very tiny team, but I work with a fantastic set of people. I have 2 designers, 1 assistant photo editor, and 2 multimedia people. And that is like we produce the magazine and do the online section, online news. Some of the recent covers last year I picked out some photographic ones, but we do a bunch of illustrations as well, which I commissioned. This is after the abrogation of Article 370. This was from Arko Datto's work. And why I wanted to show this cover was because one of the rare opportunities where we get to be more conceptual on the cover of a journalism magazine. There was an essay that was looking at the end of nature, and to think of it very timely now, of what the world would look like when in the future. And Arko is a photographer, talented photographer based out of Kolkata, and he's been working in the Sundarbans for a while on climate change and issues around environment. And I remembered this piece from his work because we've collaborated before. And I think this is a big part of what you have to do as a photo editor. You have to know what lies in people's archives, like what people are working on, what they're interested in. So who do you commission when you think of this, or who has probably done a work that you feel would fit with an article that you're running. My favorite section in the magazine, the photo essay. I think the Caravan is a unique space, definitely in South Asia. I should maybe very quickly just tell people what Caravan is. We focus on the long form and we focus on the narrative. It was India's first narrative journalism magazine. It's now 10 years old. And we look at long form and a lot of times long term. And we give quite a lot of space to photography, and we have a minimum 14 and sometimes it's gone up to 20 pages of a photographic essay. We look at this as long form reporting. Some of you may know this work. This is Laia Abreuil's work on abortion. I was absolutely blown away by it when I saw it in Arles in France, and I felt that I needed to bring it to India. Why I found it very, very compelling was because it interests me in notions of fiction within photography. I don't think it's necessarily fiction because every single one of these captions is down to absolute fact. But how do you document illegal abortion? I can't commission a photographer. Well, maybe I can, but it's a very different exercise about if women are not being able to abort their babies in hospitals because it's deemed illegal, they're going to hide into it. And a lot of the process of abortion is swallowing a pill or a surgery. But she talks a lot about inducing abortion. And an image here on the right, like women have been known, and it's a fact, have been known to drown themselves in, not drown, but expose themselves to scalding water. How does a photographer, to induce a miscarriage, and how does a photographer express that visually? I found this to be a very, very compelling project. But why I'm showing this here is, it lies at the cusp of, is it journalism or not? Because a lot of it is reconstruction. And this project stalled for a long time in the editorial team at Caravan because we were like, should we run it in a journalistic magazine? I would have no problem in pics, but in Caravan, we also sent back many, 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 many fact check queries to Laia, and she returned it back with every single one of them answered on the caption. So there's a serious amount of research that went into this, and I like exploring new ways of approaching the photographic medium and telling stories and narratives. And it's 9:39, and I have some stuff left, so I'm going to quickly go through this. Photographer from Nepal, just to give you guys a sense of the photo essay section. Please subscribe to us. We are always we're on the lookout for people to support independent journalism. But if you do subscribe to us, you can get access to all of these archives. But here is Bunu Dhungana, who is looking at taboos around marriage and menstruation. And I absolutely loved her work. I met her at Photo Kathmandu and I wanted to bring it in. Her work was very, very pertinent also to the issue that we were publishing at the time. It was a special issue on sexual harassment in November 2018, and the Me Too movement took off in India in October 2018, October 5th, if I remember correctly. So we had to really scrap the issue that we were doing for November. And mid-October, we're like, okay, we need to put this issue out. And Dunu's work fit perfectly in there. This was the cover of the sexual harassment issue. We commissioned an illustrator for it. This is also just to kind of tell people a little bit more about what I do. The creative director role, I also commission illustrators, and I really enjoy that because as you asked me, what are my influences come from outside photography, and I like that I'm able to put my output into things that are beyond photography. Also, it was an issue on sexual harassment. It was we were looking at the idea of a whisper network surrounding Jatin Das. Fantastic story by our reporter Nikita Saxena, our staff reporter, about 11 women who came out against Jatin Das. I was one of those women. So it was really a very complicated space of me being a subject in the story, also commissioning the illustrator to make an illustration about the harasser. Also being somebody who was in the organization, very, very complicated. The whole thing was very complicated, but we managed to do it. Fantastic illustrator also, Pia Hazarika, who works with us often. A lot of my knowledge about photography about illustration comes from photography. I feel the illustrations I commission are very photographic. The reason I also commission illustrations sometimes is because there are some stories where I feel photography, and especially assignment photography, is going to cause more harm than good. And this was a story that was looking at the Rohingya community in the camps in Bangladesh and how they've practically fled from genocide in Myanmar, and now are facing further persecution by the onslaught of media focus on them, especially looking for stories around sexual violence. Do I want to commission a photographer for that story? I'm not sure. So we got an illustrator, Tara Anand, who did a really good job, I think, on the illustration. Just run you through. Also, like to work with illustrations who show different representations of women. I also have a focus on gender. And to end with, this is this month, this issue, which has not gone to print yet because of COVID, but we're hoping that it does. We're not remembering, but actually a reporter went last year in May, and we published a story this year, which I think has a lot of resonance with the migrant crisis that is unfolding right now. This is the Bengal famine of 1943. 3 million people died. We call it the forgotten Holocaust. Approximately 6 million died in the Holocaust. 3 million died in the famine. I wonder how many people really know about the famine across the world. This is a spread from the Statesman. They used to carry photographic spreads. This is not an actual photographic spread. We constructed it, but the Bengal famine got its name from there. But I had the chance to commission Shomo Shankar Bose, a photographer from Midnapur. The story is based in Midnapur. The reporting is from Midnapur. And he did a great job. These are the survivors of the Bengal famine, very old now. But we wanted to visualize them. So he photographs them. But I also told him to just shoot what he sees. And a lot of it is really the environment around the place. And it's a great photo text conversation. This is the cover. Kunti Manna, we don't know how old she is, but she's probably in her 90s. She doesn't know how old she is. There's a cover. Shomo shot it beautifully. I feel that there's dignity afforded to the subject, and that's it. So that's kind of where I am. I have a tiny video. Do we have 1 minute to run it?
Sure, we can absolutely go for it.
I know there's probably an onslaught of information, so I'm very happy to have a chat after this. But one of the things that I also do is overlook the multimedia department. We started Multimedia in Caravan 1 year ago. And if you go onto our website, if you type video, you'll get all of them. But the NRC, which you also reported a lot on, Soumya, last year in Assam, we had actually a photographer who went to Assam, and we produced a 4-part video series. This is a very short 1-minute clip from a 6 or 7 minute video story around activists that were poets actually that were arrested and had FIRs. They had FIRs issued against them. They did not get arrested, but FIR is the first information report issued by the police against their poetry. So it's just a sort of a sense of the kind of videos that we've done.
Can we have more volume, please, Tanvi?
That's, I think, where we are.
हो गया 70 साल हो गया सबका नाम है लेकिन हमारा कम्युनिटी का कोई नाम नहीं है मोर देन 70 लाख पॉपुलेशन है असम में इसका कोई नाम नहीं है तो इसका नाम क्या होगा
Yeah, you probably couldn't hear me because hear the video because I was on
do you want to replay it because we got the sound a little later?
Sure, if we have the time. I'm happy to
we're good on time. I think we can watch it.
I don't know how to do full screen, but this should do, right?
I don't see the video.
ये कविता
We don't see the video, Tanvi.
शुरू हुआ था जब से ये
What do you see?
I see the folder with all the photographs of your presentation.
असम में भी ये कविता
This is good. I can see it now.
तब से ही शुरू हुआ था जब से मतलब लोगों के ऊपर टर्चा शुरू हुआ था तब से जितने राइटर लोग लिखना शुरू किया था
The power of the poetry is so much that it has shaken the those who are actively or passively has been brutalized the community. So it has shaken them.
तो हम लोग तो मियाँ पोएट्री नहीं बोलते हैं इसको हमारा पोएट्री बोलते हैं कि प्रोटेस्ट पोएट्री है क्योंकि हमारा कम्युनिटी का कोई नाम नहीं है अभी तक 70 साल हो गया 70 साल हो गया सबका नाम है लेकिन हमारा कम्युनिटी का कोई नाम नहीं है मोर देन 70 लाख पॉपुलेशन है असम में इसका कोई नाम नहीं है तो इसका नाम क्या होगा असम में भी ये कविता
It's a very, very small clip. Loud with this magic. Yeah, very small clip. Please see the whole video online. It's 7 minutes. I didn't think that we would have time. Yeah, so I can stop the sharing. And that's it.
Thank you so much for this. And this is quite an extensive journey, a lot of details that a lot of us did not know about. So thank you so much for sharing all of it. I want to start with a couple of questions, and I'll probably start where you started also. There's been a shift in the visual language from your personal work to your curatorial work, right? So could you talk about that particular shift and also how you look back at your own photography now?
I'm very critical of my own work, so I don't like my own photography. But no, I think, of course, there's been a shift because I think when I was working as a photographer, those were my very early years into, I was really getting to only know the medium. And when I got introduced to it, I was like, I want to be a photojournalist. I want to be, that was kind of the only space I wanted to go in because I think that's all I knew. But you feel that the more you know, the more you learn. I now feel the more you learn, the less you know. You want to know more and more and more. And it keeps expanding. And I think going to Iran was a big point for me, because a lot of Iranian artists are doing work that is staged. A lot of it because of political reasons as well. And I think when I was exposed to that kind of work, I was like, okay, you can actually talk about social issues, ideas around social justice. That has kind of been the underpinning throughout the work that I've been interested in. So while the visual language may have changed, my concerns are very much the same from then to now. Of course, expanded in kind of the kind of social issues that you feel that you're aligned to. So yeah, I think I got exposed to different kinds of work. I also had many fights, because many people would come to a picture and be like, this is not photography, this is Photoshop. People have like, cut and pasted things onto the photograph. And I found those conversations very interesting, because it's like, is it photography? Is it not photography? And at Caravan, we have this a lot, that is Laya's work journalism? Does it matter if it fits into it's not photojournalism, but do we feature only photojournalism? No. I want to get an idea across. And are we misleading the audience? No, because we're telling them that it's reconstructed. And yeah, so I think I like being challenged, and assuming that the audience does too, and assuming that the audience is intelligent, and if somebody is pushed into it, they would like to think through it. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, it does. You do talk about your politics here, and I would like to know how much your politics affects the works that you commission, both as a photo editor and then the works you curate as a curator.
I think your politics affects everything you do. It's very difficult to separate your politics from anything you do. So I think it affects every single, of course it affects who I commission, what kind of work they do. It really, the thing is, when you're commissioning, you're thinking about the story. So what is the editorial stand that we take on the story, and who is the photographer that is going to be able to further that stand. A lot of commissioning happens first for the text story and then for the photographers. So I think this Shomo story, the one where Shomo was commissioned, that was a real photo text collaboration. Of course, the text ideas almost always come first. And more than my own politics, I have to look at what the story is, what the narrative is, and who is the photographer that is going to be able to do justice to it. It's also where I work. I mean, there's a certain editorial stance of the Caravan, and it's to align with it. So, but I mean, my politics would affect anything I do, because you live your politics, right? So yeah, I think it affects it to a very large extent.
Also, you do end up commissioning a lot of photographers from a lot of different places. I want to understand if these choices of photographers are also influenced, or even other artists like illustrators and visual artists are influenced by representation, and how important that is to you.
Yeah, of course. I think first of all, we don't commission a lot. If you compare it to any international publication, we commission very little, because we are very, very, Caravan doesn't have a lot of funds. So we don't commission very much. But when we do, I think representation matters, and representation is in so many ways. I think there is gender, there is region, there is caste, there is class. And I always feel that whatever you try and do, I personally feel we're always lagging behind. I don't commission as many women as I should be doing. I don't commission as many people who are not upper caste as I should be doing. There are certain photographers that get recommissioned a lot. I'm being very frank. And I think that is, you always try, but under the pressure of the deadline, and under the pressure of, a story will come to you and you'll immediately have to think of somebody, and there's this constant battle between who's going to get me back what I need, for sure, because there are such few occasions anyway. So I try, and representation is important, but I think somebody like Shomo worked out really well. He's from Midnapur, and the famine was in Bengal, and I needed somebody who understood the famine from their own history, and every Bengali has heard of the history of the famine through their grandparents, etc. And him and the author Kushnava traveled to Maipeet and traveled past Midnapur. So it was very important. I mean, if I had commissioned somebody from Delhi to go there, it just wouldn't have worked. Also, another thing that I think really I have to do, which I think has worked in our favor now, is local photographers, local as much as possible. It has come out of necessity, really, and it's very tough because in certain parts I just don't know. I feel I know a lot of photographers, but in certain places I just don't. A lot of them are concentrated in Delhi, Calcutta, Bombay. Certain cities I just don't. But we don't have the money to fly people to places. So whoever's around, I try to catch hold of them. Yeah. So yeah, I keep forgetting the question.
Well, you did answer what I asked. Another bit of your life which is now defined. I mean, another bit of your career is that you've now come on board juries across internationally on various competitions, and there's always the conversation about how a set of photographs from different parts of the world are looked at from the first world countries. Is that something that you find yourself negotiating with? Is that a conversation that you always have with the other jury members? How do you look at photographs at that space?
Look, internationally, recently I was at the World Press. I have done a lot of international juries, actually. Most of them have been in India. So the representation conversations are very different. But I have a lot of fights, and I try for them to be as pleasant as possible. But this is my pet peeve. And actually, I mean, I don't want to talk about this lightly at all. I am very, 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 very angry about the focus that has still stayed in the western part of the world by many of the famous competitions. I feel that organizations are trying. The World Press called, I think this time the jury was diverse. I was part of the 7-member jury, which was the final jury that selected the finalists. But there was a 17-member jury overall. And I think that the organization is trying to have a very diverse jury because we were people from 6 different continents. To be very frank, if you look at the results and you do the tally, there's an abysmal number of women. Like, I think it's 6 out of 30, which is very, but we do anonymous judging. So you can't know at that point who is a woman and who is a male person, I mean, whose entry it is. But if you look at the numbers at the end, personally for me, I felt very deeply disappointed, and you struggle then thinking that this battle is much longer and is much harder than, like, you know, what we thought. There are very few women. The number of events that are shown, say even in the World Press results this time, east of Turkey, there's only Hong Kong, I think, and there's one from Japan. Like, there's a huge section of world that's missing in terms of representation of events. India doesn't feature, and for me, like, it was a heartbreak. But I guess, you know, you have many heartbreaks, but you try to put the idea out. And for me, this was a very seminal year in Indian history. I have not seen something like this while I grew up with the anti-CAA protests. Also, it was a very seminal year for Kashmir. I'm so happy that 3 Kashmiri photographers won the Pulitzer, because I think this was a crucial year for Kashmir to be recognized. And And when you look at, it's not there in the WordPress. So these are facts, and of course there are heartbreaks. So I definitely think that the battle is much longer and much harder than we think. But we go on and we keep trying. What I am happy about is that there are smaller shifts. The winning photo is from Sudan, and to see a revolution from Sudan about the overthrow of a dictator by civilians. And it's not a photo of Africans dressed in some tribal uniform, looking at them from an anthropological angle. I think for me, that is a small victory taken by not by an African photographer, but a Japanese photographer. So it's also the multiculturalism that comes in there. So you win some, you lose some. But I'm definitely very, very upset at the Western bias in media awards and in awards in general.
I also want to talk a bit about press freedom. You working with Caravan, which is almost a very, very difficult space to work in. I've photographed Vinod, and I photographed the entire team there, and I noticed how low-key everybody liked to be at the office. But how has it been for you to be a part of that team and to be navigating the new politics of this nation and the hostility towards press in general?
I think Caravan has changed me from, I always thought that I'd be there for a year, and now it's like more than 3 years, and I'm still sticking around. It is, for me, a great place of learning. It is one of the most diverse newsrooms in the country. It's a very, very tiny team, 38 people, I think. So how's the experience been? It's very tough to be a journalist. We have it easy. We're desk people. I think the reporters who are out on the field right now trying to bring out the stories, it's a very difficult job. Press freedom in India is slipping. But I'm very fortunate to be part of a courageous newsroom that takes risks consistently. And these shouldn't be risks. This is reporting fact. And we are constantly coming up against, mainstream narratives that oppose it. I'm sure there are many people who are, I don't think this is just happening in India. This is happening in many parts of the world where there is a state narrative that is being pushed out on state news channels. And then there's a sort of, it's the subaltern, right? It's the alternative narrative. We were always seen as the alternative narrative. But what I just wanted to mention in this, that there are I'm always for smaller victories and remembering them. Caravan's not a big, huge space. So when you're driving through anywhere in India and you show a press card of India Today, and they'll immediately recognize it. And there used to be a time when India Today or like Aaj Tak and NDTV, these are bigger organizations and easily recognizable. But when the Shaheen Bagh protests were going on, I went there with some friends one day, and we were trying to get in near the stage, and we said, "Oh, we're from the press," and they're like, "Oh, there's a hostility towards the press during the protest this time, because there was a misrepresentation going on of the protests that were taking place." And so when we were trying to enter, they said press, and we said Caravan, and they're like they're like, "Please come." And that was sort of a very tiny victory of being like, okay, there is a resistance movement going on here, and they don't feel misrepresented by us. That shouldn't be a victory. That should be the normal. So we're in a very dark space, I think, for journalism, but also I feel a very vibrant space for journalism. This is a time for people to kind of, put themselves out and put their work out and work with us. We're happy to work and collaborate with people.
I'm going to take up some questions that the audience have been writing into us. We'll start with one from Aditya Kapoor, where he's asking, what kind of collaborations do you see yourself doing in the coming years?
The kind of collaborations that photographers or anybody else approaches me with, I don't know what the next few years look like. I think it's right now, there's a new normal we're all getting used to. Maybe there'll be virtual collaborations that we all do. I don't know, more and more of the same and some different. I can't say what the future holds really, but maybe working with a photographer on a book. It could be working with them on a long-term work. It could be, yeah, I'm happy to work with photography in any and every way that people come up with an idea. So I don't have a definitive answer to that.
Roshni Khatri wants to know. She says, thank you so much for the talk. It's really helpful. I have a question about what kind of pitches is the Caravan accepting currently, and if Tanvi has any tips for pitching stories in general.
I mean, I'll just say one thing, that know the work of the publication that you're pitching to. And if you go through the Caravan website, you'll get an idea of the kind of work we do and see if your work aligns to the topics that we cover. And you don't have to propose something that's been covered, but you'll get it. Like, don't submit travel photography because we don't feature that, or don't, yeah. So know the work of the publication that you're applying to. Right now, we're doing a lot of COVID reporting. We are not doing a lot of COVID photo reporting at this point. But if you have shot something that you feel we need to look at, that's sure. But make your pitches clean. 300, 400 words of what the idea is, a PDF with images. Don't harrow, and it's not directly to you, but there's constant, like social media, there's a constant like follow up every few hours. I feel that that's harmful. Send an email, check in a couple of days. So yeah.
Yash Shinde wants to know, what are your thoughts about Yasuyoshi Chiba's work in Sudan, which is honored as a World Press Photo of the Year?
Go to the World Press website, and there's a video there with not just my thoughts, but all the entire juries. But I'll repeat what I kind of said there, which was what I just said right now. It's an image of Africa that is not an image from Africa, that is, for me, different from what we've been looking at of from there all of these years. But it's an image that last year was a year of protest. I definitely see it as a year of protest in India, but also when you look anywhere outside, it was in Hong Kong, it was in Turkey, it was in Yellow Vests in Paris, it was in Chile, so many places, right? And this was a protest that was taking place, but the boy is reciting a poem. And for me and for all the Indians in this audience, it reminded me of Faiz' poem, which has been resurrected, Hum Dekhenge, which has been resonating at so many protest sites. And that's what I thought when I looked at this image. And if this image can transport me beyond Sudan and transport me into Shaheen Bagh, which I have been, going to when the protests were taking place, or transport me to any other protest in Delhi, I think it does the job of being of encapsulating the resistance that 2019 exemplified. So I think it's a great win for the year.
Yeah. Kanika Chen wants to know, how do you make a decision on publishing photographs of violence? Do you think the circulation of photos of violence takes away agency from the victim?
It depends on, decision on publishing photographs of violence. It depends on how do you define violence. So if you're talking about graphic images, it's really on a case-by-case basis. Usually I stay away from very graphic images unless I feel that they are needed. There was a photograph by a photojournalist named Masrat Zara, who recently has been booked under the UAPA, incidentally, last week. She was part of a workshop that I had done in Kashmir, and very promising photojournalist. When the clampdown happened in Kashmir in August, Masrat could not send photographs of what was happening in Kashmir to Delhi because there was no internet. Masrat flies to Delhi, comes to me with her hard drive and gives me what she shot. Now there's a photograph in there of a man whose face is riddled with pellets. The entire face is riddled with pellets. It's a difficult photograph to look at. There is blood all over his face. And I remember having a discussion with my peers, and I think these discussions are important, but my gut told me I have to publish this because this is the reality that the state doesn't want us to see. And this is the reality that the blocking of internet has actually not let percolate onto our sides. And am I really going to be the person who's going to stop this reality from coming out to the people? It was very important for that photograph to get published. But it was the case of Kashmir because I felt that people need to see this. So it's really a case by case basis, and also expanding your definition of violence. I feel that what Ishant Tankha did in his documentation of the Maoist insurgency over 8 years, he is documenting a violent insurgency. And he could have chosen to put photographs that had a lot of blood and gore, but he's reinterpreted that and sort of, taken a slower approach, which allows me to sit with the work a lot longer. So it's like, do you want to have a immediate shock response? In very rare occasions, sometimes you do, but mostly you don't. And you asked me something about the subject, right? What was it?
It takes away agency from the victim.
Yeah, I think these are always questions to think about. We do think about that whether when a person has gone to, again, I'm going to go back to the photograph of the boy riddled with pellets. He was a protester that was shot at by pellets, by a pellet gun. Now, he is out there protesting in a public space. He knows that he will be seen. And when he is photographed like that, I feel that I'm not taking away his agency, or when we're publishing him, we're showing his reality. By not showing that, I'm actually repressing his voice in a way, because him going out to protest and being practically killed and that story not coming out to the world is for me difficult. I mean, I feel that these are not all encompassing answers. I feel they need to be judged on a case-by-case basis. There is dignity in photographs that are also violent, and I think that's what you need to look for.
I want to slide in a question of my own here.
Yeah.
It's very interesting to hear you talk about your inclination towards the conceptual works in the documentary space, which you often resort to for the caravan also, which is in a space which is primarily photojournalistic. And you do commission photographers in both the spaces. What in your mind is the relevance of each of these spaces and genres of photography, and how are they placed in the contemporary Indian politics?
What is the space for like photojournalism and conceptual work?
Yeah.
I think the space is very open. I don't think I'm concerned really with boxes. I'm concerned with what people are trying to say. So Laya, when she's talking about abortion, and that being the first chapter in a larger body of work called A History of Misogyny, I want somebody to talk about this. So whether it's conceptual, whether it's journalistic, whether it's any other form, I'm interested in what is being said. And I feel that the conceptual can have a space within. I feel the conceptual needs to be brought out a little bit from the art, from the white cube art space maybe, and be put out to the audience in other ways as well. Maybe it's the distribution that we need to look at. I don't think, what space do they occupy in contemporary Indian politics?
And let me just give you a little background, because I do, like all of us say, that all the works that you commission are very political, and they're informed by your own politics in a lot of ways. What influences your choices on, if for a certain project you would like to navigate the space of conceptual photography, or versus having photojournalism speak about the same thing?
I cannot answer that question. I just don't think I think in terms of that I want this kind of work. If you look at Shomo's work, the last work that I showed about the forgotten Holocaust, it's a mix. We're looking at, for the archival images are all photojournalistic, and I had a choice there to use either archival photographs, or I could have used artist sort of artworks that are very seminal to the Bengal famine. Like there's Zainul Abidin, who is now Bangladeshi, there's Somnath Hor, and there is Chitto Prasad. These are very famous artists that did artworks, not photographs, didn't make photographs, but commentary on the Bengal famine. I wanted to build upon the archival photographic history, especially of the Statesman, because the Statesman at the time was the only newspaper in India that published about the famine. All the Indian dailies were trying to repress the news. Now, because I used photographs there, I wanted to build upon that history with the survivors. So I commissioned Shomo. Now, do you qualify Shomo's work as photojournalistic? It's broader. I think it's documentary, because he manages to expand it a little bit. If it was just portraits, maybe it would have lain photojournalism. I feel it's at the cusp. Because a lot of the photographs are open-ended, and I think what makes it conceptual is that when you look at the captions with the images, there's a photograph of I don't know if you guys remember, but there's a bird, a dove, inside a cage, but the cage is kind of open, and the caption with that was about how people went missing. So it's not really a journalistic caption, you know, it's not like a bird inside a cage in the village of my people, whatever. We're trying to make sort of a conversation, a dialogue between the text and the images. So that's conceptual, maybe. I think it's really what the narrative demands.
Sure. We have an anonymous question here. As a Kashmiri, your stance on Kashmir has been really encouraging. When it comes to Kashmir, how important do you think it is to give a platform to local photographers rather than mainland photographers who try to whitewash the conflict?
I think there is a space for local photographers. I mean, everywhere. I will not say that. I think that this is a question about representation, right? So I think I'm not of the opinion that only people from a place have the right to document that place, because then we're actually taking out certain perspectives that we get from outsiders. So I feel that there should be definitely an emphasis on local photographers and narratives. The second part was what outsiders who try to whitewash the narrative.
Yeah.
I think that there are outsiders who try to not as well. So if I'm working with a mainland photographer, and I have actually, we worked with Sumit Dayal, who went and made a 4-part series in Kashmir on after 370. Now he's a mainland photographer, Kashmiri Pandit. Didn't grow up in Kashmir, but has family there. Why did I commission him? Literally because of logistics. He called me, he said, Tanvi, I'm going to Kashmir, I'm coming back in 2 days. Do you want something? There was no internet. If I had commissioned somebody there, I couldn't even commission anybody there. How do I call them? There's no, like, call them, and then how are they going to get their material to me? We're severely resource strapped. Sumit said, I'm going in and I'm coming out. I'm going in and I'm coming out. That's my plan. Do you want something? I was like, sure, okay, do something for us. And so I just said, like, there are outsiders also who don't want to whitewash the narrative. So yes, and I have commissioned local photographers. We commissioned Masrat a few times, and Sana Irshad Mattu, both female photojournalists. And I know that I'm very proud of them. So yeah, I'm all for local.
Tanvi, I just want to know, how are you on the time? Because we do have a lot of questions and a lot of things that people would like to know.
I'm okay.
Yeah.
There's some long questions. So.
Yeah, there are. Okay. So there's one question from Geetika where she's asking, while curating a photo story, how do you try to do justice to the visual narrative as per the text and layout? Or the text and layout changes based on the photographs?
Yeah, of course it changes. Every layout is different. If we had a set template, my job would be so much easier. I would be really lounging around a lot more. Every layout is different, because the layout also speaks to the way the photographs are read. The way a photo essay works in the Caravan is that we cannot commission new work because they're long form and long term work, and I don't have the money to commission somebody to go out on a long term work. It's the truth. So I'm not going to do the disservice of like telling somebody to work for 6 months and not be able to pay them. So we work with works that are already made or in progress, but that I know about, that I feel that we want to bring in. But we do a new edit for the magazine that I work with the photographer on. We publish Soumya's work also in Shravasti. So we do an edit, and then we write the text. Mostly we write in-house. Sometimes I write it, sometimes there are other people write it. The reason we write the text in-house is because I want to give all the money to the photographer. And then we do a layout. So I work with one of my designers. Really fortunate to have a designer to work with on this because I don't know InDesign, but I have an idea of what I want. I know the edit, I know the sequence, I know where things should go. But I also, working with the designers, also collaboration. They also bring their ideas in. And frankly, for me, it comes in from my world of curating exhibitions. That was curating in a physical space. This is kind of bringing it onto the page. But of course, it changes with every photographer.
We have some questions from Vivek Singh. So there are going to be different parts of the questions.
Okay.
Yeah. So Vivek begins with how much of the photography work you commission is well paid in the Indian context? And he asks this because for photographers and journalists to really remain independent, they must be financially independent. Then there's a side question to it where he's asking, let's take one question at a time. I'll add the side question to it, where he's asking, is there a minimum day rate or assignment rate or feature rate which is decided among publishers in India?
What was the first part? The absolute first one is he's asking for day rate.
And so the first part he's asking is how much of the photography work you commission is well paid in the Indian context? And he has some questions about the payment policies of the Caravan, mostly in the context of, I asked this because photographers and journalists, to really remain independent, they must be financially independent.
Okay, I'll start. Vivek is asking this also because I think he's had some experiences with the Caravan. I've never commissioned you, Vivek. I'd love to, but I know you've been commissioned before me. How much of the photography work is well paid? I try to do work. Look, I wish I could pay more. I have definitely increased the rates since I came in. My constant battle with the management is about the increase of rates. Well paid, I wish it was much better paid. I'm going to go backwards and address your question. In order to be independent, photographers, journalists to truly remain independent, they must be financially independent. I'm going to say, in order for institutions like us to remain independent, we must remain financially independent. So the Caravan is also going through a very difficult time of sustaining, which it has before. I think what has changed is a subscription. We're asking for subscriptions to be able to sustain us. We're not, I mean, if photographers want to subscribe, that's great. And that's kind of where our money comes from. So, and Vivek, I think you know where we don't take our money from, etc. So I'm not going to get into the details. I think that we have paid decently. I don't think that we have paid abysmally in the time that I've been here. I wish I could pay more. I am always looking for grants to be able to pay, like to be able to apply for grants to pay photographers. There are a lot of issues with that. There are a lot of political issues also. Do we pay 90 days? We have managed to. There are photographers that have been paid within 2 weeks as well. Maybe I need to commission you and like change this perspective a little. Yeah, I wish we could pay more. The question really is about our survival. Should there exist a Caravan to be able to take up the stories that we do and challenge some of the mainstream narratives that exist, or should there not? And some of the times I just decide not to commission and take bad photographs from reporters. So that's my choice.
That's also the second part of his question, where he says, how much blowback do you face from editors who used to not treating photographers and picture editors as equals? I believe anyone who's worked in a Indian newsroom knows that the photo team and the reporters do not get treated as equals. So is that a case that you have been struggling with also, and how do you deal with that?
We give it back to them. That's kind of my way to. I am the what do you call? I cushion the blow. I don't let the photographers face the blow back from the editors. The photographers never actually have to talk directly to the editors. I am their liaison. And whatever the editors may have to say about the photographers, usually they don't. I work with nice editors. I mean, I have fights with them, but they're nice people. But I'm the liaison in the middle. And is there an equal relationship? I think Caravan is a unique space, and we're always kind of trying to build spaces that that are different from other newsrooms. I feel that we try to treat everybody as an equal. There's usually actually another conflict that used to exist was between the design and the photo team. And the art director used to overrule the photo editor a lot of times. I know this used to happen in publications. We solved that because I'm the art director and the photo editor, so I don't have to fight with anybody. But I have a great design team. So did I answer your question? There are a lot of fights here with editors. I have to sometimes really make them understand that, like, you know, our audience is not dumb and they will get it. And can we run some images that are not so direct? Sometimes you win, sometimes you don't. Sometimes I have to run photos that are really bad. But I have to face it. The photographers don't.
Shuchi Kapoor has a question. Given that so many journalists and photojournalists are at life risk when they're working on critical stories, are there any avenues or programs for safety training for them that you might have participated in or can recommend? Do you think it might change the way reporters, photographers work on field? And I think also, just adding a bit to this, I think it's particularly interesting in the Indian context because a lot of photographers who've only worked in India and who've not worked with international agencies don't even know that trainings as these are important or should be a part of their work.
So yes, many are. What was the question? I lost it. I can't see it.
It's basically about it's if you go to the answer. Yeah.
Do we facilitate the training? We have not, because I don't know how many of you know about the Caravan. We're a tiny ship, and we are just fighting a battle to survive against a very polarized system that exists at this moment. So all the money that we really have, which is very little, goes into reporting. We just put it into reporting. All the money goes in there, and we are not able to do trainings. However, we have done through a grant, we did a National Geographic partnered workshop. This was not on risk, etc., but on narrative. So if somebody approaches us to do a collaboration about a conflict training workshop, we've done workshops in collaboration at the space in the Caravan office, which is also small. But we're happy to do collaboration. We have not till now, but just the way our own journalists are also facing these risks. And I think what the institution does in return of not being able to afford this kind of training is, like, we have the back of the people who publish with us. So the institution stands behind each and every word of each and every story. So if there is any issue that comes up with the story later, if a journalist faces risk, I have not known of a single instance where Caravan has backed off and said that they need to deal with it on their own. We are very much there with the journalists that publish with us. So I think it's like a solidarity-based thing. We're all at risk actually at this point. I mean, there are many with the institution itself is as well.
Kajol Ranwal has a question. What are your views on the future of long form or slow journalism in times of social media guided short attention spans? Does Caravan intend on experimenting more with videos and podcasts going forward?
I don't know, this question sounds like we should stop doing long form and do video and podcasts. I don't know what the future is, but the thing is, our cover stories range from 9,000 to 30,000 words, and the Twitter limit is what, 228 words or something. So I think we already inhabit a very different world. I think there's space for everything. So while we recognize that social media is a way in which people are consuming information, I think it lacks nuance a lot of times. Also, the great thing about long form is that it allows you to go back a lot of our stories have a history section, and allows you to go back in time and connect a history to a contemporary politics, which for me has been reading a lot of the stories. It's been great. But I think long form is also important to create documents for the future. We just have to do stuff so that people are able to access it later and reference it. Are we going to experiment more with videos and podcasts? Yes, we've been doing a lot of videos. During COVID, we've slowed down, but if you go to the website and type video, you'll see all our videos. We've done one podcast. We intend to, but again, we have a 2-member multimedia team, and I work with them, and I do all this other stuff too. So we do intend to experiment, but I hope we do more.
Sumit Meher wants to know, as an editor or curator, what do you like to see in others' works?
Others like other photographers.
Yeah, photographers' works, I guess.
That's a really open-ended question. I want to see, what do I like to see in others' works? I mean, a novel idea or a novel approach, one of the two is really something that excites me. Something at this point, I was thinking the other day, with all the stuff going around the anti-CAA protest, we were looking at so many images of protest itself, of the sites themselves. I was wondering, and this is maybe an idea I'm throwing out to some photographers there, I was wondering if people are sort of looking at the idea of resistance outside of the protest site, and if I receive something like that, I'd be quite excited. So I'm always looking for, you could be approaching the same topic, but with a new approach, or you could have an entirely new topic to tell me about that I don't know. Either of the two, but I'm really looking for a visual story around resistance, which takes it beyond the protests. And right now everybody's at home, but are people still resisting? I'd be curious.
There's an anonymous question. What advice would you like to give to someone working on curating his or her family archive? The idea is that of reviving and preserving memories of childhood and deceased grandparents.
And to see.
And deceased grandparent. Yeah.
Someone working, don't use the word curating your family archive. Just collect it and cherish it and enjoy it and just, I can't tell somebody how to work with their family archive. That has to be one of the most personal things that you do. And really, I think when you connect with the archive in your own individual way, you'll know what to do with it. There's no formula. I think that's a very individual. I'd have no formula for it. I think, and the day somebody gives you a formula on curating your own family archive, I think the magic of it will be lost. And though one thing I discovered from the recent issue of Pix was that what you see in family archives, what you see in family photographs, just remember that that's maybe not all that there is. Like sometimes you see only the happy memories, and all the fights and all the, a family archives are really also about what is left out and than what is in the archives. I know that I felt that with my family archive. I have some very smiling photos with some members of the family that I've had terrible relationships with, and I was like, how does this equate? But I guess that's what the family archive is. It's complicated, like families are. So I guess, yeah, you have to find your own way on this.
There's a very open-ended question from Gautam Doshi, where he's asking, what do you think of the German photographer Maximilian Munn's work for the World Press Photo Awards, which was accused of being copied or reconstructed frames of the Iranian photographer Solmaz Daryani? Yeah.
What did I think of his work? How do I answer this question? There was a process that was followed within the World Press as an institution, and as it was a responsible process to be followed, because when an allegation was made, there was an investigation that was done into it. I feel that this is an area where we should maybe, and somewhere maybe you should think about this, doing like a panel discussion around plagiarism in photography. I think the investigation's result was that there wasn't definitive plagiarism that was done, and so the entry was not disqualified. They went through various steps in coming to that conclusion. I think the WordPress website has a statement and various steps of, because the allegations were made both ways, like there's one allegation, then there was a response to it, and all of this. I have my personal opinion, but I feel that as a responsible jury member, etc., I shouldn't bring that in here. But there was an investigation that was done, and it was and we have to go by due process, though I have a very strange relationship with that term because of the kind of association it also has with me too. But I still feel that there needs to be a process of allegation, because tomorrow, if there is another allegation, are we only going to accept it? That being said, I know Sulmaz quite well. I have published her work in Caravan. I am a big fan of her work as well. So I'm going to leave it at that. Go to the WordPress site, read the process that was followed, and maybe if you want, we can have a conversation about like what that process was. But I think basically plagiarism in photography has not been discussed enough. It's a topic that maybe needs to be explored much more. Just like how, I guess, I don't know, what were the other big debates in photography, like manipulation around. Like manipulation in a photo versus staging of a photo versus coercing subjects, etc., etc. Like, how do you know these things for certain? Was the subject coerced? Was it not? Like, these are conversations that need to be had, and maybe we'll come to a point where some guidelines are made around what plagiarism really is. But in this case, I think it was concluded that it wasn't plagiarized, and so it was not disqualified.
We have an anonymous question. How can one start a career to be a photo editor / curator in India? I do think that it's a question that a lot of us would like to hear answers to.
Find an opening in an organization and jump at it. Maybe a good way to, as an exercise, would be to, it's tough to edit your own work, but if you have friends who are photographers or who have collections of photographs, maybe ask yourself, do you like working with other people's work and not having your name acknowledged at all? And sometimes, you know, it doesn't feature in the, it doesn't have the fame. It's going to be a book by the photographer. Editor is rarely mentioned, etc., etc. So if you're okay with that kind of space of working with other people's work and working on creating something out of it, ask yourself that question. And if it's yes, then go for it. I think an exercise to do would be to start with, maybe take a friend's archive and build something out of it. Build a narrative, build a book dummy, build a mini exhibition in your room only, and see if there is a conversation between the artist and you that you enjoy. That would be a good exercise. How to start a career? I don't know, man. Like, there are such few, there's just such few opportunities. But if there's one that opens up, just keep an eye out and apply. And whatever kind of photo editing it might be, you know, like. But I think even outside of organizations, like, you can just like make a book dummy with a friend and see if you enjoy that process of editing. So,
Aman Singh wants to know what type of stories you're looking for publishing.
Go to the website, see what work we're doing, and find stories that that kind of align with it. But overall, what are the stories I'm looking to do? There's a whole world out there. I don't know. Right now I can think of COVID, but I like stories that have intersections. So maybe that might be something you want to think about, like health intersecting with gender, health intersecting with caste, inequality in the, how are you going to, I mean, various, like gender intersecting with religion. I remember seeing one of the entries in WordPress this year, which I really enjoyed. It was a gender story, like you could see that it was a gender story, but it was about Muslim women. And so it was looking at the I mean, not really looking at the persecution, it was celebrating the Muslim identity in one way. But the Muslim identity is very persecuted at this point in the world and in India. And but it was around women. So that intersection of gender and religion was very interesting for me to be able to see. I don't know. There's a whole world out there. Think of some ideas aligned with this. COVID and resistance. That's an idea. So, I don't know.
There's a question from Sipten Haider.
Hi, Sipten. Sipten.
How important is it for a visual story to be personal?
It's great when I think I like personal stories because I think it brings an individuality to the work. A lot of, if you really kind of go at it, like which story is not personal, because I think stories are as much about what you photograph as much as they are about the photographer. So the way that Soumya, you would do the story on Child Brides would be very different from the way that I would do it, because I think there is, and in your story, like, I'm sure there is some resonance to you as well, and from where you come from and how you approach the people that you photograph. So I think it's important for it to be personal, but at the same time, I think there is also a need to photograph people that are underrepresented, marginalized communities. And if you, but there, I feel that there can be a personal connection there as well. You just have to find a way to connect with the story. If it's personal, it's great, but there are many other ways where a story is great as well.
There's an anonymous question again. If a photographer's work has already been featured in some other publication, would you feature that work?
Usually, if it's featured in an Indian publication, no. If I'm really compelled by it, I'll call the photographer and be like, why didn't you give it to us first? And then they'll say that that person paid me more, and I'll be like, okay, that's fine. But usually we don't, but there aren't any hard and fast rules. We publish a lot of individual photos that have been published elsewhere. Like with Soumya, she always gets calls to me at like 10:30 at night a lot of times when we're publishing a story the next day. And I would have looked at something that she maybe did for a foreign publication, but I'd ask her, hey, are there, it's a story done a while ago, and I'd be like, okay, I know you went to this place. We're looking for some, like the NRC story, like we're looking for some images around, what was it? What were we looking at? Like detention centers or whatever we're
foreign
looking.
tribunals, yeah.
We were looking for foreign tribunals, and I called her, and at that point she didn't have any, but she had some other images. So I looked, and some of those may have been published and some of those not. So in individual photographs, we do publish work that has been published before, because I don't have the money to commission, and I don't, we're not a newspaper. We don't have a roster of photographers across the country. I literally have one guy with me, an excellent team member who's my assistant photo editor, who also doubles up as a photographer, but he functions only in Delhi. So, but photo essays, I try to publish work that has not been published before in a Indian or South Asian publication, but I don't have there's no rule. And there's always a different edit that goes into a Caravan.
There's again an anonymous question. Would you be interested in working with British Indians who have stories to tell as an immigrant and would like to get published in India in order to change the perception of NRIs?
Yeah, of course. We're interested in pretty much everything that's related to India and South Asia. And in photo essays, we actually like look at the larger world as well. And then we're looking at like what are the issues that they're representing. So I'm very curious to know what this perception of NRIs is. There are, yeah. So I'm please send your work. I'd love to see it.
Yeah, it's a pitch here, right here in front of you.
Yeah.
Masood Server wants to know how to approach you to show works for publications in Caravan magazine, and how can one get nominated for Joop Sword Masterclass? Is you one of the nominators? Should one approach you directly, and what do you look in photographer for nomination as well as for publication?
Oh, wow.
Lots of questions.
Go to a website and right at the bottom of the website, it will be submit to us, and there will be an email address there. You can submit to us, or you can write to me at tanvimishra.caravan@gmail.com. You can send your pitch there. Please send a well-drafted pitch, because it's not possible to reply to every pitch. I try, but it's difficult. For Joop Squad, I don't know if I'm a nominator next year. So, but if you want to get nominated by anyone, I think there's a list of nominators that is announced. Is it announced? I don't know if it's announced. But this year I did put it out that I'm a nominator, and then people just sent me. I wrote my email address there. So. I hope I'm approachable, and you can just write to me. Email is best. And yeah, so next year, send in your work.
Abhijit Dep wants to know, what future does fiction-based narratives hold in the Indian photography scene? Do you have any pointers for the same?
In the Indian photography, yeah, I think there's a huge space. I really like fiction based work, but I actually really, and I should change the slide in my bio, I think, because I like it when photographic works that are recreated or are fictional but are drawn from reality. Azade's work is that, where she's looking at 17 deaths in Iran that happened from the first coup d'etat till the Islamic Revolution. These are real deaths that happened, but there was no photograph of the actual death. So she reconstructed it by research that was done over 4 years. Now that research was rooted in fact. The image that was made was it fictional? Was it? Yeah, it wasn't an image of the event, but it was, yeah, so it was made later. So yeah, I'm quite interested in this intersection between fiction and reality. Yeah, so.
Again, an anonymous question, which curators have inspired you in your work?
I think my inspirations have come from outside of the curatorial space, as I said, from photographers, filmmakers, writers, historians. My inspirations come from photography and visual culture, and not that much from curators.
Indranil has a question which I think you've broadly answered, but just in case you want to add something to it. As a curator and being a judge for many esteemed competitions, how do the selectors judge or select a body of work, and what are the steps that you take to go through while the process? So probably he wants to know what's the process and what are the steps to it.
It's different for every contest. Yeah, it's really different for every contest. They set the rules, we follow the rules, and then we debate. World Press had a very, 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 very extensive process. It's tough to trick the process. So that was a learning. And that was a way to see, like, I guess, what the way they've been doing it for 63 or something years. I don't know how many years they've been doing it, but yeah, so they define the process, and it's been, I think, developed over a period of time, and it's still evolving. We give feedback and then it evolves. So how do you judge? It's on so many factors, right? Like, I don't know, it's a really open-ended question. But you're a group of 7 people. It's not a unanimous decision. Sometimes it's a number-based vote. Sometimes it's a full vote. Sometimes it's not a full vote. Like, it's various, like Hindu photojournalism, Chennai Photo Biennale organized this, their first year of the awards, that had a very different process. So yeah, they set the rules, we follow the rules, and if we want to break the rules, we ask them, can we break the rules? And then,
okay. You might see on your screen there are about a handful of questions still left. You can choose whichever you want to make the last question for the day.
What is the next issue about on Pix? I don't know. We just launched this one. Give us a break. I don't know. How would you respond to the UAPA against photojournalists and journalists? It's insane that journalists, it's actually terrible and terrifying that journalists are being that UAPA is being used as a tool to repress their voice. I am deeply disturbed by that, by this development. Masrat, who was one of the participants in a workshop that I'd done and a photographer that I work with very closely, was also booked under the UAPA. We are hoping that the charges are dropped. There is a campaign going on. Currently, I think there's Gohar Gilani and Pirzada Ashik in Kashmir, who have also been booked under the UAPA. I mean, there's a long list, right? And then there are like 11 activists that are already inside. It's a very dark time in our history when activists have been languishing in jails, especially when the rest of the world is freeing most of their prisoners, especially like a lot of their prisoners, lower risk prisoners and political prisoners. So, yeah, I mean, it's a distressing. I chose the most depressing question to answer. But, yeah.
That is a sad note to end the discussion on.
But the resistance lives on, so I'll end it on that.
Sure. Thank you so much for your time. The session has actually lasted for almost 2 hours.
Oh wow! Okay.
So thank you for
Thank you.
such a large chunk of your time and for answering everyone's questions. We've had a very interested audience, and I want to thank them as well for their presence here. I want to introduce my team, who's been very instrumental in organizing all these talks over the past couple of weeks. We have Geetika, who's been doing all our designs pretty well. We have Gurpreet, who's been taking care of our social media and been ensuring that our invites reach you. And we have Anjali, who's made sure that this conversation goes smoothly. So thank you guys. Thank you everyone. Thank you so much, Tanvi. We'll end the conversation here. Anjali, can you please show the calendar for the next couple of talks for the people who want to register for them? We have Sarah Lean, the former director of photography for National Geographic, who will be joining us on the 8th of May, followed by John Malouf, who is the co-director of Finding Vivian Maier, and followed by the co-founder of Nepal Picture Library and Photo Kathmandu, Nayantara. Please do register for these talks, and we look forward to having you. Thank you so much. Good night.
Thank you, Samya.
Thank you. Good night to all the people in this part of the world, and have a good day to the rest. Tanvi, you could just hang around for a while.